My name is Dmitry and I'm Customer Success Traveler. I have recently acquired a superpower here. What is, you ask? Networking, negotiations, and the skill of discover opportunities for each of my customers throughout the power of empathy and also learned Ikigai collaborations. Today's guest is Ayanda Nkokazi, Senior Customer Success Manager from South Africa, the queen of CSM strategy of the African continent, and a person who loves her family and is ready to help you with CSM knowledge to grow business metrics in your business. Today we are going to talk about two key aspects of CSM: strategies and onboardings. Agreed. This where it starts. Strategy lays the positions of the department of overall orientations of company, and onboarding is the first touch with the client. First, the seatbelts. We are going to start the teleconference from Vietnam to South Africa. Ayanda, thank you for joining Being Successful movement and coming to me to share your experience. My first questions to you is tell me a little bit about yourself. What your experience in fintech industry and how you came to see to CSM methodology, and tell us which your superpower.
Hi, Dimitri. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'm very happy to share my experience with others. And so a bit about myself. I am Ayanda Nkokazi, born and bred in South Africa. And I have been working straight after high school. So like most South Africans, unfortunately, my parents couldn't afford for me to go to varsity. And so in the midst of, what we consider gap year, I got into working. And so I haven't really stopped ever since. So I've been working ever since then. I am a mother of two gremlins. I call them gremlins because they look cute, but they can be trouble. And I'm a wife to my husband, who's also my third gremlin. Essentially, how I came into customer success, honestly, was almost a bit of like an accident. I had been working in customer facing roles. I worked in retail banking. I worked in a bit of logistics, doing forwarding. And then I came across a startup company in 2015. It was a startup company, fintech company. The name is called Prodigy Finance. They're basically like my family. I love them forever. And that's when I started to gain the experience or essentially understand and establish that there's a massive difference between customer support and customer success. That's how it was introduced to me. I was working in customer support, and for me, naturally very good at connecting with people, creating connections. And so customer support for me felt really, really difficult because it was really more reactive. I could genuinely do it, but the problem was that it didn't come naturally to me. I wanted to be able to help people before they even knew they needed help. I wanted to be able to proactively be there. And so a few years later, my manager at the time then introduced a role called customer success specialist. And that's exactly what the purpose of the role was, right? Was to be proactive. It was to check in with customers. It was to create connection. It was to be there even before a customer needs help. And then, of course, then support was more on the reactional side of things. And so that was about like 2017. And so since then, I've really grown my experience in customer success. I've branched out into different other industries as well. So I've been in SaaS, and I worked for a great company called Go High Level, which is a SaaS platform, as well in a customer success role as well. And quite recently, I was a senior customer success manager for a logistics and supply chain software. And so my experience is quite unique in the sense that I am from South Africa. I live in South Africa, and I've been working remotely for a few years. So it's been quite a bit of a difference versus most of my friends and family members. But my experience in customer success has really been nothing but amazing. Customer success, as anyone knows, is still a growing role, but it's a very, very great career path. And so I'm here to, talk about that and talk about what one can do within customer success. So yeah, I hope that gives you enough about me and my experience.
Okay, very cool experience. Have you had any experience with companies from other country, maybe like the USA? Could you tell me how CSM work there?
Absolutely. So like I mentioned earlier on, right, the customer success role for me, and I think just in general in South Africa, only arrived, like a few years ago, about 7-8 years ago, the concept of it. And it was really sort of like the startups in the big cities really knew more about customer success than just generally in smaller towns, which is where I'm actually from. And so how it sort of initially started was really more of like a cadence to customer support. It was really still quite reactive. It was really still quite about getting, tickets answered and helping somebody immediately, dealing with complaints quickly. And so even till this day, I still think there are some companies in South Africa, especially bigger corporates, that don't really understand or actually have really created a customer success environment. And so what I tend to have to explain a lot of the time is the fact that, in South Africa, people are asking me, like, what do I do? And I'm like, I'm customer success manager. And everyone's like, what does that even mean? Like, what is that? And so I have to always explain. And the closest thing I always come to is to say that I'm almost like an account manager, but I'm not an account manager. And so that's sort of like the understanding of it. But the experience that I've had with other countries, so I've worked for US companies, I've worked for a remote company in Lithuania. And so in those companies or in those customers, they are quite aware and understand the purpose of customer success. They are, I think, way more open to the idea. They understand the idea, and they actually quite literally see the difference between customer success and customer support. I think in South Africa, we're still quite establishing that. And I think, again, big old corporates and big old companies that have already been established in South Africa haven't necessarily gone back and said, okay, you know what, there's this new way of doing things, let's figure it out. I think they've still just kept to, what they consider a winning formula, which is just being customer support, really, being rather reactive and doing pretty much like old school, taking care of a customer. And so, yeah, there is quite a big gap and quite a big difference between the two. But I do think, South Africa is going to catch up at some point. And I think that we're well on our way. It's just really more about finding platforms that can, educate and, spread different resources and, explain to, South Africans, young South Africans starting in the job market, or even older South Africans that are actually looking to work in a career that requires them to be more customer facing, but in a different way, which would then be customer success.
Okay, thank you very much. Over the last 2 years, the CSM trends has started to develop strongly in the Russian markets and is being incorporated into the strategy of companies. The leaders, in my opinion, e-com, fintech, CRM, SaaS, and I think telecom is developing a bit. The problem is that in the CSM paradigm, Russia is accounting, which does the job well. Over the last year, as a figure show, 5% of Russian markets, the source or the well job board Russia considers CSM as a separated specialty. Most of them divide it into divisions: six, Gartner Analytics, Customer Experience, Accounting, responding of post-sales, Marketing, Leads, Project Management or Product Management, opening new opportunities of the customer. If results, if we writing its bottom line, today it is necessary to show how a business can use CSM, reduce marketing cost by increase ROMI, and finding new scalable marketing bundles, and increase the average check in the second purchase and production of new and quality goods or service, thereby increase ROI. Now, let's talk about equally important aspects of onboarding. Could you tell us about your onboarding experience? What are the key points of the important to pay attention to when onboarding for the first time? And share 3 life hack that help you, your colleague, to unlock the full potential of onboarding.
Yeah, I mean, really great question. And actually, thank you so much for giving me the insight around, how CSM is sort of put into Russia and Uzbekistan. So that was really great insight that I wasn't really aware of. So thank you for that. So onboarding experience, I have been working, as you know, in CSM for a few years, and I've definitely, I'd like to think I've honed the skill of onboarding quite well. And so, to your point, CSM has really developed in specific industries, right? In fintech, like you mentioned, in e-commerce, as well as telecom, and even in SaaS tools. So hence, onboarding becomes really important, because in order for a customer to be fully satisfied and really utilize, a product or service that you provide, they actually need to understand what it is they're doing. And even though that, technology has gotten better, we've got AI nowadays, people still need some form of help or training or understanding of a product or service, especially a digital one. With the massive, pandemic that we all faced in 2020, it really, came with massive tragedies and just a lot of loss. But it also gave businesses and companies the opportunity to then relook at, their best practices and sort of put them out there in a way that is more achievable, which they had to then go fully virtual for everything else, right? And so this is where the key of onboarding comes in, is that technology has grown, and we have been forced to grow with technology because of the pandemic. And so not everybody is going to be tech savvy and know exactly how to use a product or a service, but they are in need of it. A perfect example of this would be a small business that is looking to do some marketing. They have to nowadays have an online presence and do some digital marketing. And so this is where the onboarding comes in, is that they're going to be looking for tools that can help them to accomplish this, right? To achieve that goal, to make sure they are doing the digital marketing. And in onboarding, you're sitting in a place where you have to sort of work and teach a customer how to, utilize the service, make sure they're getting the best value out of their service, but also making sure that they're well equipped to sort of work on the product or service with or without you. In doing onboarding for about 8 years now, 7, 8 years, and in that time, I've experienced different ways of onboarding. And so there's also the need to understand that onboarding is different depending on obviously the company you work for, the business you have, but also, what industry is in, right? So you've got your fintech, which, because it's finance, even though it's technology, there are some laws, there are some regulations that really need to define some of your processes, including your onboarding. And then you also have, onboarding if you're working with a SaaS product or tool that aren't that don't have as many regulations that one needs to abide by. But so some of the the key points, like I mentioned, I have about 8 that I tend to use. The first one being focusing on the value of the product or the service, not just the features, right? So this really speaks to a company or anybody, right? So when you're onboarding them, is that they came to this product or the service because they knew the features. But now what you want to do in an onboarding call when you have your customer online is that you want them to understand that how this will add value to their business. How will them utilizing this product help them? How will them utilizing the service add value for them? And so, yes, of course, you want to do a rundown of the features, but the most important thing is really, really making certain that you let your customer know the value that it will bring for them. The second thing is that you really want to try, encouraging your customer to get used to new terminology, right? So an example of this would be around companies that, use a CRM that calls an automation. And then you'd have a different platform that calls automations workflows, right? And so you want your customer to understand the different terminologies that they're using. This will also help with your brand as well as understanding your company or the product that you are providing wholeheartedly. And so what I definitely encourage is you want to teach your customers, what terminology they should use. This can also help them in the future when they're asking for help, is that when they understand the terminology, then they'll be able to actually, ask for what exactly it is that they need help with. Something that I also definitely believe in, my third key tip, I guess, would be around getting your customers to be self-sufficient, right? So when you're doing your onboarding call, you really want it to be very educational. You really want your customer to understand exactly what the product or the service is, but you also want to make sure that they are well equipped to figure out some of these questions on their own. Because, for example, people aren't always working at the same time. Somebody could have a full-time job and still have a part-time product or service that they want to put up. And so then they'll come to you or ask for help on something. And if you give them resources to help them and encourage them to be more self-learning or self-sufficient, that would really help not just you, but also the customer so much, because then they'll know exactly where to go. So a good example of this would be to then give a customer, a link to the resources, or on your onboarding call, you show them that, hey, click here. This is where you find our help desk. You can search certain things. Here's some key phrases that you can find. Take a look at, this demo that we have. And so giving them that ability to find that and for them to look for it and seek it on their own is so much more empowering and encouraging. And so while I'm doing that, I'm also checking for understanding, like, hey, maybe we do a couple of things. Let's say, hey, so where would you find this question? Where would you find the answer to this question? And then, that would make me sort of understand where they are in terms of understanding where the help desk is. So that's really a cool tip that I tend to use because, again, it's really more about making sure that not only is the customer knowledgeable about the platform or the service or the product that you're using, but it also helps you understand some of the key things you need to sort of give additional help to. So you want to make sure that you are telling your customers things that are extremely important to them that can help them achieve their goals with this platform or this service or this product. But at the same time, you want them to be able to sort of visualize, like, oh, wow, where do I go again for the help desk? Oh, yeah, it's that little question mark. That's what that means. So that's really important when it comes to your onboarding as well. Say help the next. So maybe other people are so much better off with reading an article that has bullet points, or somebody's better off, going through a video or a bit of a demo instead. And then some other people want that one-on-one training. And so it's so great as a company or as a CSM that you provide various options and various methods of, training and learning of the product or the service. And so for, example, for me, what I do my typical Zoom call, once I'm done with that, I tend to actually record those, offer to send the recording so that the customer can also use that for their own training later on. But then I'll also follow up with an email that would say, it was great chatting to you. Here's a quick rundown. We discussed this, we discussed that. And here's some additional resources that I think would be very helpful for you. you mentioned that you want to have more of a online presence in terms of social media. I went through the feature that will allow you to do your social media posts. Take a look at it. Here's the link, right? And so not only did they have that visual conversation with me, and we went through it on Zoom, but now they also have a recording of the exact same session. And on top of it, they know exactly where to find an article that's written about that. Right. And so you're kidding, understanding and comfort and encouragement of self-efficiency on the onset really goes a long way in terms of creating a very healthy, long relationship with a customer, which subsequently would then, of course, mean retention and would mean that they renew their subscription, or better yet, they'd actually end up buying, a bigger package, because now they would have received all the care that they needed. Is I like to give customers a bit of like homework, nothing too hectic. If it's a specific software, I'll be like, hey, how about, you do these 2-3 things, and then I will set up a check-in call for us. Here's my calendar, book a slot, so that when we have our next check-in call, we can go over some of the things that you've done, but also, make sure you have a list of your questions so that I can answer them in our next check-in. Right. And so that, allows, again, for you to make sure that your customer is understanding what they need to do and how to use a platform, but also giving you the opportunity to see where the gaps of knowledge are, and for you to fill those gaps. So yeah, those are pretty much the 8 key points, I suppose, that I have and utilize it when it comes to onboarding customers as a CSM.
You CSM mentor. Thank you for you. Yes. Now I suggest we move on to the topic of strategy. Could you give your perspective how on how CSM is now in South Africa, and how the strategy for growth of growing CSM influence difference from maybe USA?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so like I previously mentioned, CSM is just customer success as a whole is quite new to South Africa. And I think right now the strategy and how it's sort of functioning is that, one, startup companies are more likely to have a lot more knowledge and experience around it. And I think they are also learning the difference between customer success and customer support, and really trying to tailor that. Right now, customer success in South Africa really feels like a catch-all position. Like, you have to do everything. You have to be customer support. You have to do the marketing. You have to take care of retention. You have to take care of renewals. It's pretty much everywhere. And I think in that regard, the US is also quite similar. Is that, everyone expects CSMs to essentially be account managers, to be accountants, to be marketers as well, and strategists and analysts. So I think just as a whole, that the world is doing a great job, and there's a lot of great resources that I'll be more than happy to share a bit later on customer success. But I still think that on a higher level of things, there hasn't really been that clear distinction in a practical way. I think theoretically, companies understand what the difference should be, but I think practically is where the disconnect is coming in, because even in the US, as well as established the role is, in comparison to South Africa, I still find that some of the companies that I've worked for have really, really thought of customer success as like the filter and the catch-all department, which, really sets up CSMs for failure, right? Because as a CSM, the goal is to proactively be there for your customers, but it's also to build relationship. It's a lot of relationship building, a lot of connecting to ensure that customers return, right? So that will subsequently help in terms of renewals and retention, right? But if you are asking your CSMs to do more than just that, you then obviously are compromising the main reason why you have a CSM team. And so I think in that regard, there's a lot that still needs to be done. And there's a lot that still needs to be learned. But I do have to say, hats out to the USA, because they have quite a lot of resources available, like I mentioned. I mean, for instance, for me, because I'm learning so much about CSM all the time, and it's not something really that's, spoken about or educated about where I'm from. So I'm having to find those resources on my own. And so a great space for me to go has always been LinkedIn. So I read on the LinkedIn posts, follow the LinkedIn posts. Another thing that's really helped me, and I really recommend for a lot of people, is to find a mentor. So my mentor, her name is Jennifer Eason. She is phenomenal. She literally has the job or the title or the role that I want in my life and the experience that I want for my career. And she has really helped me steer in the right direction when it comes to customer success. And so for me, having that mentorship has been quite crucial in helping me understand not only what I expect from a company in terms of customer success, but also allowed me to articulate what skill set I can bring to companies. And so other resources that I've definitely utilized is Daphne Lopez from HubSpot. She has an amazing podcast that she hosts. And so I listen to that quite often. I also then listen to Diana DeSeuss on the Catalyst in terms of customer success. She also has a YouTube channel. And so you have to keep educating yourself when it comes to customer success, because it's evolving all the time and because it's quite different, right? Customer success for a SaaS company is so different for customer success for a fintech company, right? Because when you're working with finances, there's a whole lot more structure provided because there's regulations, there's financial, laws and things that you have to abide by. But if I'm doing a customer success for a SaaS digital marketing, there aren't really that many rules or regulations, on a legal basis that I have to worry about. And so there's, there's definitely nuances within each industry, but of course the sense of customer success is pretty much the same. And like I mentioned, that disconnect between the theoretical and the practical bit, I think, impacts not just South Africa, but also US and Lithuania that I've worked for as well. So yeah, that's pretty much, my sense of it. And, I also, like I mentioned, I have my mentor, but I also, keep relationships still going. I still have clients that I've worked with in previous roles in previous companies that I'm still in touch with on LinkedIn, for instance. And that also helps me know and understand customer success through the lens of a customer, right? Because I could give all the best practices of CSM, I could give all my experience of CSM, but what's most important and what I try to always bring every time I join a company or I work with a client is that what's more important to me is meeting the exact needs that my customers want, right? Like it doesn't help for me to sit and have the strategic plan, but without understanding what it is that a customer really needs and what they're looking for. And so that I can help them achieve that. So yeah.
What metrics do you think are the most key in CSM SaaS company? And how do you look at the development of affiliation intelligence in CSM in South Africa?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to metrics in CSM, CSM actually requires a variety of metrics. So some of them are focused on the customer specifically. So you're looking at your CSAT, you're looking at your health scores, you're looking at your NPS, right? Those are quite specific to the customer. Others are focused on how the customers interact with the company. So for instance, a SaaS company, you want to check for usage, right? Are they signing in? Are they logging in? How much interaction, engagement are they having with your website or your service that you provide? And like I just mentioned, what's most important is to remember that customer success should always be focused on the customer, right? The ultimate goal of a customer success is to increase revenue for the company, but that requires a strong emphasis on meeting a customer's needs and goals and never sort of losing sight of that. In terms of South Africa, Technologically, I think in the biggest cities have more of a exposure, so, by the biggest cities, I'm referring to like Cape Town and Johannesburg and Durban. Those cities have companies that have established a lot of technology framework and technology usage versus, smaller towns. So I'm in a very small town. Currently, I live in the Eastern Cape, in a small town. And so the idea of even using AI, in the conversations I've had with people around here, people don't even know what that is, right? But in the bigger cities, of course, there is an understanding of what AI is. There's an understanding of how technology has helped. And so I think in South Africa, our downfall is the fact that there aren't enough resources that, teach people about customer success. There aren't any resources that really, push young children even through school about having a career in technology. In South Africa, we still look at the best careers being doctors and lawyers and teachers and nurses. And so those are great careers, absolutely phenomenal. But there's also now this new wave of, hey, we should start, teaching children to, about technology. I mean, short story, my daughter is in a school, she's only in grade 5, and they actually teaching them how to code. And I was so impressed by that because I was like, I didn't even know what coding was until I actually got into working. And that was also like 4 or 5 years after I'd really started my career. And so for her at the age of 11, learning about coding, opens up the floodgates. It lets her know that there is more out there.
Okay, Ayanda, thank you for sharing this experience. I learned a lot of interesting things for myself. Now I can apply the knowledge and lessons already running to employment and monetize your experience. In the first comment, there will be a link to LinkedIn profile. Well, we land our teleconference and we move CSM to the next country. Ayanda, would you like to say anything to your new customer success friends?
Yeah, I'd love to say welcome to customer success. It is a great journey, a great career. If you're a person who's looking to consistently learn more, if you're a person who loves building relationships, you are a person who is always looking to connect with the customer and putting the customer first, then CSM is definitely a role for you. And if you're looking to work remotely, CSM is quite remote, honestly. And so if you are looking for roles remotely, please, by all means, join the customer success realm. There are a lot of resources out there. Like I mentioned, you can listen to Daphne Lopez's podcast. She's on HubSpot. There is also LinkedIn, great articles on LinkedIn. You can also follow Diana Jesus. She also is a catalyst, customer success. She also has a YouTube channel, but she also is on LinkedIn. And I'm even part of a Slack channel or Slack group, which is Women in Customer Success. So if you want more information on any of these resources, I'm more than happy to share. Follow me on LinkedIn. Dimitris will put my link down and I'll be happy to share as much as I can.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye, Dimitris.